Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, September 26th, 2022. I'd ask that those present please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batkins. Here. Mr. Brado. Here. Mr. Olgiati. Here. Mrs. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Tominello.
Here.
Mr. Witt, yes. Here. Mr. Burgess.
Here. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of September 12th, 2022, approval of the bills in the amount of $991,961.01, and approval of the August 2022 revenue and expenditure report. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Support. Got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next on the agenda is approval of the regular agenda. Board members, prior to the meeting, we did discuss the addition of E2, a discussion regarding the repairs to the bike path. If there are no other modifications, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the regular agenda with the addition of item E2.
I'll make that motion.
Support. Well, we have a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is announcements. I'll begin with a brief announcement about Selfridge Air Base. Our very own hometown Selfridge Air Base will be conducting exercises tomorrow, Tuesday, September 27th. These exercises may result in nearby areas hearing sirens, loudspeakers, and simulated gunfire. So nothing to be concerned about, but be on the aware, and I did send an email to department heads and different folks, so in case they do get phone calls on that. Our Harrison Township Water and Sewer Department is looking for a utility worker to join the Harrison Township team. The chosen applicant will be part of the crew that is responsible for maintenance and upkeep of the Harrison Township water and sewer infrastructure. This position is part of a collective bargaining agreement, and it offers competitive wages, health care, dental, optical, and disability insurance, paid vacation and sick time, as well as a pension. For more information about the position and how to apply, visit the Harrison Township website, navigate to the Employment tab. Our Lake St. Clair Metro Park is hosting the annual Hot Cider Hustle, Saturday, November 5th. Runners can compete in a 5K, a 10K, or a half marathon. Information can be found on michiganruns.com. Saturday, October 1st at 11 a.m., the library is hosting Steve Mrazek, who is the museum director and historian for Selfridge Air Base. Mr. Mrazek will present on the World War II military campaigns in Sicily and Italy. On October 5th, the library will host a class where they will teach residents how to make a jack-o'-lantern out of an upcycled book. All materials will be supplied for this craft. Space is limited, so registration is required. For more information on these and many other great community events, you can visit the library's website, htlibrary.org. Call them 586-329-1261 or email them at librarian@htlibrary.org. Our Harrison Township Senior Center hosts a monthly casino trip on the last Friday of every month. Space is limited for these trips, so please call for details and to register. Our Senior Center also features chair yoga Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. for seniors to increase their strength and flexibility, as well as an aerobics strength class Mondays at 1 p.m. and Fridays at 9:30 a.m. Our Senior Center also hosts bingo every Wednesday at noon and euchre every Thursday at noon. The Senior Center also takes many field trips throughout the year. For more information on times and events, you can call our coordinator, Jen, at 466-1497. Our Harrison Township Parks and Rec Group, or committee, is hosting their trunk or treat, moving their trunk or treat to Lake St. Clair Metro Park. This year, Hollowpalooza will be held on Saturday, October 15th at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. Trunk or treat and other fun activities will be happening from 4 to 6 p.m. Food trucks will be on site, and a showing of the movie Hocus Pocus will begin at dusk. We are also looking for families and groups to decorate their trunk and pass out candy. Please visit the Harrison Township website for more information, including a sign-up link. And as always, for more information on these, as well as all other township events, you can call the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445. Visit our website, harrison-township.org, or follow us on Twitter at HarrisonTWPMI. Does the board have any other announcements?
Just briefly about the upcoming election. Just want to let anyone that has requested an absentee ballot know that those will be going out later this week, so you should see those in your mailbox shortly. Anyone that wants to request one still has time. You can do that up until pretty much the day before the election. And I just want to also, we've gotten a lot of phone calls in our office from people confused. They get 3 or 4 different applications for absentee ballots. Anybody can send those out, and if you use it, we'll process it, but it's not us sending out additional applications to you. It might be from a candidate, it might be from a political party, it might be from some third party that's sending them out, but if you have a question, you can call us and we're happy to talk you through it.
Okay. Any other things? All right. Any other announcements? At this time, I'd like to call up and recognize our county commissioner, Mrs. Barbara Zinner, who's going to offer us a brief update on county activities.
We haven't, is this on?
It is not, but the camera will swing around and pick you up as soon as it'll be on, but for right now, that's what you got.
Thank you, thank you. We have not had meetings this last week. We'll have them all next week. We'll have them almost every day in October for finance. One of the things that we did have in session was notification. And I know you've spoken of that, especially with the big water pipe that broke in Port Huron, or around Port Huron. Several of the commissioners spoke to their cities or townships and asked how was the notification in to their citizens. And some of them had a fan-out way to get to their citizens. Some of them did not. I really didn't talk to you about it. I know you mentioned it before. Some cities and townships really don't have a fan-out to citizens about something big like that. And talking to people, this was brought up by several commissioners, there are a lot of people who really don't watch TV a lot. Some people have it on all day, they have the news on all day, but there are a lot of people who, they may watch it at 6 o'clock for 5 minutes to see the weather, or 10 o'clock in the morning, and that's it for them. They don't watch Andy Griffith, or they just don't. So I wish that the board would consider a notification system in a fan-out situation. Even when I mentioned that I had seen the water bubbling up on the road, which I knew it was the water guy was right there, he handled it, people were coming within an hour, it was all settled. But the people in that area wouldn't necessarily know that. They turn their faucet on, then maybe they're gonna go fix dinner and the water's brown. And do they have backup water? Of course, we all like to have backup water for things, but one of the neighbors there mentioned that to me, and he said, you know, people just don't know. With the internet now, a friend of mine who goes to Florida for 6 months said, he said, I get emails on what's happening in my neighborhood in Florida. It's all internet, it's all set up. So not everybody uses or has their cell phones, but most people do. And I think it's something to consider, please, for the residents. One thing that I like to do at the board is when I meet people, when we're talking about concerns, and you know, I talk to a lot of citizens, or they contact me about things here and in the shores, is when they have a concern and they want to speak about it, I encourage them to come to the county board meetings, and I've mentioned that. you're aware, Ken, and the board probably is too, about a situation on Jefferson, just after the curve, by the park down there. And a couple residents wanted to speak about it, and I said, come to the board meeting. So they did a couple weeks ago. I've explained that situation. I had pictures of that area. Well, it's water, but it has all the E. coli grass, E. coli stuff there. They can't even put their boats in the wells. So I had pictures put together. It was all within a couple hours just before the meeting. Mike had called, and I said, okay, why don't you come to the meeting? He did, and a neighbor came. And once the commissioners saw that and heard them speak, which was 3 minutes a person, they were really taken back by that. That made a big impact on them. I guess visualization is everything, and listening to them. So I did put a press release out today in regard to that and to what's happening to us at the bottom of the area with Oakland County dumping. Candace talks about it, Doug Martz talks about it, we've all talked about it. So we'll see what can be followed up with this. It's nothing new, but it's something that hopefully will stimulate something. But for anybody who has a concern, there is that public speaking that is available to them. Also, people are going to the cider mills and having a great time. And I hear people talking about shopping now, which I think is wise. That's good. But I want to relay to people that we're in a different time right now than we have been a few years ago with spending. Heat bills are going to be high, like our air conditioning bills. I've seen higher at times. But I don't think people realize that you don't have to buy a lot of presents for the kids. What the kids really like is to be with the family. Hear the old things, the old fun things about your parents and grandparents. Play with the kids. Have cake and pie and eat and have fun. Just enjoy the seasons, have fun. Don't put yourself in a bind when you're coming toward the holidays, because the insurances, everything's going to be going up. And rather enjoy your family, use the holidays for what they're about, being with family for the reason for the season, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. So I appreciate the comments, and I echo concerns about the process of notification. We're in an interesting transition. So, you know, I'll be contacted by one resident, and I can tell they're calling from a landline, and I can't text them back. And I'll have another resident, you know, send me, you know, an instant message, and so we're really in this in between where some folks are still using a landline, some folks are. Everything is online, and all things in between. I appreciate the commissioner's comments regarding the advocacy concerning Lingbaya. There's a filamentous algae that seems to be in a life cycle off the shores of our community, especially in the southern end of our community. It's a problem way bigger. It's not a township problem. It's not even a county problem. It's going to take state and federal funds to solve it. But we need to constantly advocate to get that message across. So I appreciate the comments and the support of the residents regarding those concerns. Any other announcements? Hearing none, we'll move on in our agenda to item D1 regarding some special assessment districts. Mr. Witt, is that your?
Yes, sir. Thank you. At our August 22nd regular board meeting, this board discussed resolution number 2 for the special assessment district for the St. Clair Haven Weed Control Venetian and Archer Drive section of the canal there. During that resolution, it said tonight is the date of public hearing for the project. This is known as public hearing number 1. We noticed the public hearing twice in the journal. The notice was sent to each titled owner of property interest to be assessed, whose name appears on the tax records, sent by first-class mail and addressed to each owner. So this is their opportunity to speak for or against the project. So this time, we're looking for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Olgiati to open the public hearing regarding special hearing number 1, or public hearing number 1 for the special assessment district for the St. Clair Haven Weed Control Program. Any discussion on the proposed motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Burkest?
Yes. So at this time, we've opened the public hearing regarding the Special Assessment District for the weed control program in the St. Clair Haven neighborhood, along with Venetian and Archer Drives. So anybody who wishes to offer public comment at this time, we encourage you to come to the podium and do so.
Mr. Supervisor, seeing no public comment, I make a motion to close the public hearing at 7:17 p.m.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt to close the public hearing. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Olgiati. Any discussion on closing the motion? I'm closing the public hearing, I'm sorry. Hearing none, seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Burkest?
Yes. Next on the agenda, item D2, resolution number 3, Mr. Witt.
Yes. The next step in the Special Assessment District process is to adopt resolution number 3, which directs myself to create the roll and make it available for review for residents prior to our next public hearing. Because this is a contractual cost item, the costs are already preset for the 4 years of the proposed Special Assessment District, 23 through 26. It averages somewhere around $58 per lot is where it tops out at. So.
And again, the actual cost is based on the final cost based on actual costs.
These are contractual amounts at this time, so barring something unforeseen, this is about as close as you're ever going to get in these types of things. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, any
motion.
discussion, or if not, we'd be looking for a motion to adopt resolution number 3 for the SAD for St. Clair Haven Weed Control, Venetian and Archer Drives.
So moved. Support.
Was that Mr. Badkins?
Yes.
All right, support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Burkest?
Yes. Next on the agenda, item D3, regarding resolution number 4.
The last is resolution number 4 tonight, which sets the date for public hearing number 2, which is a resident's opportunity to speak to the assessment roll as prepared and to hear any objections thereto. We're proposing this to be held on December 12th. There isn't any real rush because we're not treating weeds until next year, and this gets us past the election for the clerk's office. So.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion or on the resolution, or is there a motion to adopt the resolution number 4?
I'll make that motion to adopt resolution number 4.
Okay, is there support?
Support.
Got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Olgiati to adopt resolution number 4. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Burkest?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on our agenda, item E1 regarding an appointment. Board members, Mr. Mark Bacha is a current member of our Planning Commission, and he also serves as the Planning Commission liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals. He recently expressed an interest in resigning from that ZBA liaison position. Mrs. Amanda Oparka has expressed an interest in serving as the PC liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Therefore, I am recommending that we accept the resignation of Mr. Mark Bacha from the ZBA and appoint Mrs. Amanda Oparka as the PCA liaison to the ZBA for the remainder of the term to expire December 16th, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Brado to accept the resignation and appoint Mrs. Oparka. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Let's see, next would be item E2 regarding a discussion regarding the bike path. Board members, you may recall, I don't remember quite the timeline, but earlier this year, the board approved, I think, not to exceed $5,000 for an analysis of our bike path system. see what the repairs were, try to come up with an estimate. We did get an engineer's estimate of $750,000 to completely redo our, well, I should say redo, improve our bike paths. Some of our bike paths are newer, like only need crack sealing. Some of the sections have suffered significant damage due to roots and need some complete rehabilitation. The engineer's estimate came back $750,000. We then directed, after reviewing that, to go out for bids. We did get the bids back, I believe with an extension on Monday was the due date, a week ago from today. But the bids came in with some notations, some suggestions. We had some questions on timing, things like that. So we worked with Mr. Newmer, our township engineer, and came up with what we think is a reasonable recommendation. Right prior to, or when you guys sat down, you may have seen a package presented, a number of pages presented by Mr. Newmer about this. And ultimately, we think we need to kind of move forward and get these paths done for a number of reasons. But having said all that, I'll turn things over to Mr. Newmer, and we'll discuss or hear why we think we want to go ahead with repairing the paths, and then maybe have some brief discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Guest. Board members, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the agenda this evening, although this wasn't a scheduled item, so I appreciate your adding us to the agenda on short notice. Really, the impetus for this is, I had a discussion with the contractor today, and they told us that if we could get the contract approved and get the process moving, that they could have the project done, at least substantially completed by November 1st. So we'd like to take that opportunity and get this project moving. The usage of the trail, it's certainly still, there's a lot of people out there, but the usage goes down in the fall, so we're impacting fewer people using the trail. And then to get it brought back up to snuff and whatnot so that it's ready for the spring season would be a good idea. There were a couple of things, as Mr. Kess mentioned, that we were working with the contractor since we opened the bids last Monday. One was they had offered us an alternate solution for a portion of some of the fixes in the trail. After having evaluated that, we determined that it may be appropriate to use that in some locations, and we're going to mark out the trail and walk through it with the contractor and see if there's some areas where we can use this alternate method. Basically, what they're proposing is we had some areas designated for a 2-inch mill and then overlay, and the concern from the contractor was if we took 2 inches of the pavement down, that there may not be enough pavement and base supporting that the machinery could operate on the trail without breaking it up. So what they're proposing to do would be to do some small areas of milling at the end of each of these patches and then overlaying on top of the trail in between. We feel that that's probably appropriate in patches where it's a longer stretch so you don't get kind of an up and down like a bump or a change in elevation. On shorter areas where it would be too kind of roller coaster hilly, we won't do it. But there'll be some opportunities to do that in the project. And when we do that, areas where we do that, we'll be able to reduce the project cost because the contractors offered us a savings for that. So we'll be evaluating that as we get started into the project. The second thing that we've been working on is we were notified by SEMCOG that the original earmark grant that the township received for building the trails along Jefferson, North River Road and such, that there was some money remaining in those contracts and that money could be possibly recaptured and repurposed. So we've been working with MDOT on that. Sent them some notifications that we were interested in receiving that money. It's about $215,000, give or take. We did contact MDOT today and said, hey, we're ready to move ahead with this project. Where are you at? And they said, well, we need to hear from FHWA. Yeah, it's going to be a couple of months. So in discussions with Mr. Verkest today, we decided that rather than holding off on this project, we'd like to get this project started so we can get the trail fixed up for spring. And that over the winter time, if that money does become available, then we can look for some other uses for that money at that time. So it's an opportunity that we're still pursuing. It didn't come to fruition to support this project, but hopefully it'll come to fruition to support a future project. So those are the two things that we've been working on over the last week, and which kind of caused us to not present this to you at that time, but to bring it to you tonight. In with the bids, you'll see that there was one bid, $752,750. The bid is from James P. Contracting. It's a contractor that's worked in the township on several projects, very successful. We've been very impressed with the work that they've done. We have a good working relationship with them. I feel like this is a fair and honest contractor. They do good work, and they're very respectful and work well with the residents. So we're happy to see them as the low bidder on the project. There is only one bid on the project. Unfortunately, in these economic times, these are the things that we're seeing on projects where we get one or sometimes 0 bids. So we were happy that this is a contractor that we're familiar with and that their bid came in close to our estimate.
Mr. Neuer, just
Yes.
to interrupt, it was my understanding that you did have other bidders. In other words, there was some interaction, so we know that more than one contractor looked at this work.
We had 2 contractors that pulled plans to look at the project, and only one of those contractors submitted a bid. So
Right.
there was another contractor, they decided not to bid it for whatever reason.
Yep.
So, so that's the construction bids. We do have included in with the memo tonight, construction engineering services. Those come in two portions. There's construction inspection, which is included in the construction bid in the form of inspection days. This is a vehicle that we've used in the past for doing construction inspection of projects. Helps to limit the exposure that the township has to changes in inspection costs. So the contractors bid 30 inspection days, so they get paid for 30 inspection days. And then as the inspection days are used, that cost of those days is deducted from the contractor's payment. So in the end, if they bid 30 and they use exactly 30, everything comes out even and everybody's happy. If they get the job completed in less than 30 days, they get a small incentive for getting paid for the days they didn't use. And if the project goes longer than 30 days, any inspection costs above and beyond the 30 days that the contractor bid end up getting deducted from their payment. So in essence, the contractor pays for any delays that happen, inspection time for delays that happen. So, so that's included in the bid. In addition to the bid, and above and beyond the $752,750, we're recommending that the township establish a budget of $14,000 for construction engineering services. This would be in services outside of construction inspection, would include construction staking, field engineering, processing payments, pay applications, reviewing shop drawings, pre-construction meeting, those types of things. This would be on an hourly basis, and the township would be charged for the actual hours used with a budget of $14,000 is what we're recommending. The construction inspection budget would be about 1.9% of the total project cost. The amount that's bid for the construction inspection services equates to about 3.4% of the construction cost. So with that, we've got a recommendation in 3 parts. The first, that the township award the construction bid to James P. Contracting in the amount of $752,750. Second recommendation is that you establish a budget of $14,000 for construction engineering services to be invoiced on an hourly basis. The third recommendation is you authorize up to a 10% contingency amount to be used at the discretion of the township supervisor to address any changes or additions that may come unforeseen circumstances during the project.
So,
Any other questions? We'd be happy to
Just
address.
one quick question. You had mentioned that, this is probably just a fat finger, but on the bid tabulation, it has inspector days. It says 850 days, and then it's a $30 cost. I'm assuming those are backwards.
Yes, they are. So unfortunately, with the format that we enter the bids into, it doesn't allow us to enter a unit of dollars, and it doesn't allow us, the contractor, to enter in a dollar amount of days. So those are backwards in the nomenclature, but they're correct in the math.
Yeah, so
That's
300
what I
300
figured.
days, or
Yes.
30 days at $850 a day.
I figured
Yes.
since you called attention to it, I would just make
Yep.
sure we were.
Yep, that's what it is.
So-
The only comment that I'd like to make, Dave, is when I've been out on the path looking at everything, and I don't think this would impact the overall price very much, if at all. But I did notice that a few of the areas where benches were, the pads that were under those benches are really screwed up. And I think that if you're gonna spend the time redoing this path, they're gonna look even worse if they're not addressed. It's not something that, it's really more of a visual thing.
Well, so one of the subcontractors in the unit prices is concrete, but I don't think that they're dealing with that there's some approaches and ADA ramps, things like that.
Correct, yeah, we hadn't anticipated replacing the pads under the benches, but that's certainly something we can talk to the contractor about, and.
I don't think it's all of them, I think there's just a few.
Okay.
There's a handful, there's
Sure.
not, some of them are like brand new, but some of them are really bad, so.
So a couple of notes that I had assembled prior to this and reasons, again, I don't like the last minute nature of this, but I also don't like the notion of this work carrying on till the springtime. So we had an estimate of $750,000. We had multiple contractors look at this. Some folks might say this isn't the type of work I want to do. Some folks might say I simply don't have the bandwidth this late in the season to do it. So the bid is, I mean, within $2,700 of what we estimated the cost would be. We have a good long-term relationship with James P. Contracting. They did the senior center parking lot. They did Cherry Lane paving. One of those projects was an SID project for residents. One of those was our own project. Both went very well, so I think that's important. You know, sometimes you say, well, we found a new contractor, we're not really sure, but they can do the work. This is an example of a contractor that we have a history. I'm going to tell you that senior center parking lot's probably good 8-10 years ago. So I mean, we've worked with them for a period of time. I know conversation with Mr. Badkins, and I agree as well. You certainly respect when a contractor voluntarily comes forward and says, hey, I've got an opportunity to save you some money on the project. Their total savings could be as high as $75,000. We probably won't see that in a couple of areas, but I'm going to guess 40 to 50,000. Probably the most attractive thing to me, the work being able to be complete this season. When we closed the bike path, when we did the crossing at Metro Parkway, when we did the work for the Beechwood pump station, it was, I mean, I don't care how many signs we put up, I don't care what tape we put up, people just, there's an ownership to that path. And that project was a little earlier in the season. This is a little later in the season where, you know, some of that interest in using, certainly there's people who use the path every day of the week, and that's one thing. But there's definitely a slower demand in the fall, greater in the spring. Choosing not to do this work and pushing it to the spring pushes us into that busier season. So that's a concern. We don't know what would happen with those costs. If we choose not to move ahead, we might be talking about $800,000 in the springtime. We really don't know. I suppose I could argue my own argument. We could be talking about a lesser price, but based on what we've seen in the economy and, you know, inflation, I don't have any reason to believe that we're going to see a lower price if we wait 6 months. The last thing that I'll talk about in terms of the reason why this is on the agenda, because I think doing the November, getting this work done this fall, the reality is we know there's some sections of the path that are in very poor shape. Failure to act when we have a contractor and the price is within our budget and they're willing to do the work by November 1, I think exposes us to some liability. Failure to fix this path as soon as we can and as aggressively as we can. God forbid someone is injured. What's our argument for why didn't you get it done when you could? The $215,000 that's out there, it's important to understand that prior path work, we really did a phase 1, a phase 2, and a phase 3. All of that work that we've done to construct new paths had to be funneled through the county. The federal government, those funds, that $215,000 and really $2.5 million associated with that, that's an earmark that goes back to when Candace Miller was still in DC representing us. So we're thankful that she got us those funds. But the reality is when federal funds flow down, the federal government doesn't recognize the township. So this $215,000 is really, I'm not sure that it's actually there. I'd love to find out, and I'm optimistic, and I hope that we find out we can use those funds. But the reality is the draws on those funds are not something that we did. Those are all things that the Department of Roads, or you know, if you go back far enough, it was the Road Commission, frankly. So those funds could be there, but I don't like the notion of counting on them. If they come through, if we had an estimate of like November when we might know the status of those funds, is that right? Something in that time frame?
At the earliest.
At the earliest. So we're not going to do any work in November. But, you know, let's say we get to November, December, and we find out there's an extra 215,000. Well, what a blessing. Let's talk about areas where we can expand that path system.
And that project would still have to flow through the county as roads money, so the county's gonna take their 16% on top of there for administration of the cost, just like they do in all our other projects. So
Yeah, there's a process.
No, I'm just saying.
And
like,
that's
it's not-
federal dollars are gonna be spent differently. These are federal dollars. We're talking about using, you know, ARPA funds for this. But that 215 has a lot of other strings,
Yeah,
a lot of other steps, a lot of other hoops, and so waiting for it just doesn't seem to be responsible. But if we find out we get it, let's talk about another, let's get subcommittee, look at areas. I will tell you, one of the probably the single biggest request I get is a path to take the 10-foot path. We know that we have a 10-foot path to Bridgeview, and we have a 10-foot path over Bridgeview. We can travel east, but we cannot take a path west from North River Road and Bridgeview because there's a clear zone there and they don't want pedestrian traffic at an area where planes are basically landing. So if we want to complete a loop, if we want to get around Selfridge and connect to the northern part, I mean ultimately to the, you know, Macomb Orchard Trail, we're going to have to travel westward along South River Road, which really comes with some advantages because we could connect, you know, potentially town hall, Lance Crews, the schools, and that sort of thing, and get it flowing in that direction. So maybe we'll find out that we can use these funds next year or in a future funding year. But I just don't think it's worth waiting for. It's interesting because I kind of vacillated on a motion that would recognize the 10% contingency, because the reality is, if James P. was accurate and we can eliminate some of this milling, we could save as much as $75,000, which is 10%. But the reality is, when we get into these things, they'll go to saw cut. What they do is there's some areas where we've got roots growing under the path, and they're going to use trenchers to eliminate those roots so that they don't cause future problems. But some of those areas might involve saying, hey, we've got to take a tree down. And this is just the best way to get an extra 5 to 10 years out of the path, because this tree is so close, it's just going to push, you cut that root, it's just going to push more roots under the path, and we're going to be kicking ourselves for not taking a tree down. So, I tell you, I think this is the right thing to do. Let's get the work done. It's the right time of the year. I don't think it's going to get any cheaper. I think it reduces any liabilities we have. So I did develop a proposed, write a proposed motion. But before I might offer that as a motion, I don't know, I don't want to stifle any discussion, questions, any issues the board has.
I just wanted to know the scope, so it's not all the path, we're not gonna do the newer ones, correct?
Yes and no. So what we talked about, and this was actually Mr. Witt's suggestion when we were walking and doing a street cleanup, we were on phase 2 of the bike path, and we said, that's pretty good shape, but there's some cracking, and so we really should do some crack sealing. So there's, and Mr. Newmer's probably better at answering this, but there's anywhere from nothing to crack sealing to patching, and, you know, all the way to milling, and, you know, and cutting out roots and redoing it. So this is a comprehensive, I don't think we're doing anything other than crack sealing along North River.
I believe that's correct.
Right. So that was really our phase 3, that was 2016, I believe, so that's about 6 years old. But anything older than that, phase 2 runs from really the S curves at South River over by Sundog, you know, heading west.
We've just seen when we've done projects, if you come back with crack sealing, you're really extending that original lifespan of it. So
Yeah.
if we're taking this chance, we're doing this work, we need to do it all.
Sure.
And maybe say when we talk about the spillway, the path that runs along the spillway, which is probably collectively the worst section of path. A lot of that is just milling, replacing, or in this case, if it's suggested, to cap it. So, but again, maybe we get to an area where the contractor says, hey, you know, this is a good idea to just add a cap on top of this, but we're seeing some puddling here. We might suggest that we put a culvert underneath. If that's what it takes for drainage, those are the kind of things that we're going to see in the field where we want a representative, you know, kind of covering for us. Last comment I have, the $14,000 in costs to wade trim. If we were a larger municipality, we might have an engineer on staff and we would say, okay, for the next 60 days, you are strapped to James P. and you're following this and giving us feedback. We just simply don't have that person. I think in the end, occasionally paying up to $14,000 in contracted services is probably an economically responsible thing, because we're probably not gonna talk about these paths for another 10, 15 years. So this is probably the most efficient way for a municipality our size to do this work.
And that's 1.9%, right?
Yeah, works out to,
Versus,
right.
if we get to 215, then that's 16%.
Yeah, well, and the 215 comes with other strings.
Right.
This, you know, we get a little bit more flexibility, but again, yeah, we're saying, hey, what's a reasonable price to pay for that oversight?
And I was just saying, I feel comfortable with the contractor. They not recently at this point, but they did the project at Stony Creek Metro Park where they had a similar issue with their path around the lake, so they were doing that exact scope of work there. When we were doing the senior center, one of their estimators said, hey, we're doing this project, I think this is what you guys need to do, and da-da-da-da. So you know, this is right in their wheelhouse for type of work.
Yeah, they have that experience to where they might say, hey, look, from our experience, maybe you just grind the approach, grind the end of it, and cap the middle of it, and the user won't notice.
I know you guys have spoken highly of them, and I'm gonna vote yes on this. I'm just curious, do they give some sort of guarantee in here that it'll last a minimum of 8 years or 10 years?
Short answer is no. I mean, when we're coming in and doing patchwork on an existing path, we're not replacing all the base, we're not redoing all of it. We're just putting in and replacing small areas and doing, basically, this is light to heavy maintenance is what we're doing, not actual reconstruction per se. So it really doesn't come with a warranty like that, because the contractor doesn't have control over all of the components of the project. They're dealing with what they have there to work with, so.
And maybe a follow-up answer to that is, there would be nothing preventing us from saying to Wade Trim, if we could go back in time, we want the contractor to issue a 10-year guarantee on these paths. And the reality is, and this is me, you know, kind of speaking a little bit out on a limb here, but they're gonna do something like, well, we're just gonna double the cost, because we're gonna assume that we're gonna have to do significant work. So we like that notion as a taxpayer. We like that notion of, hey, if we're paying the money, we're getting a guarantee. But the reality is, if we tie that contractor's hands, we're asking them to promise something that they don't control. So, you know, there are certainly things, you know, 6 months after this, or, you know, something's crumbling, something's a problem. When we did phase 1, 2, and 3, we did testing after the fact to the path. But the cost to construct all of this path would be probably 10 times what we're talking about here. So what we're doing is really I think a responsible expenditure. But
Mr. Smith, I would also offer that if there's anything that's wrong with the areas that the contractor does work in, if there's a problem with their workmanship or their materials, they'll certainly address that.
right.
And in our experience, there was a couple little things where maybe we had some ponding in places where there obviously shouldn't have been, and they were pretty responsive getting out there and doing this. They actually did a third project for us. They did Moran Street, the other private road, SAD.
Yep.
This was our fourth.
And I think that's a part of our insurance too, not to belabor the point, but if you're dealing with a contractor and you say, hey, you know, we had a problem here, and pretty soon every time you call, it goes to voicemail and it's crickets, you know, you kind of think to yourself, gosh, do I really want to deal with these guys on the next project? So if you have an experience where reasonable issues during construction, they'll come back and fix, I think that, you know, it's kind of killing the golden goose. You know, you want to think about a long-term relationship.
I make a motion to award the contract to James P. for the bike path reconstruction in the amount of $752,750 plus a 10% contingency, and to authorize to contract with Wade Trim for construction engineering services not to exceed $14,000, with the funding to come from ARPA dollars.
Excellent. Good.
Support.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt, with support by Mr. Tominello. We had a fair amount of discussion. Any further discussion?
Well, just I want to, so the warranty and the workmanship of what they do repair, is that stated in the contract? I mean, I know the handshake, how that all works, and it's a good contract.
Yes, I believe
But
it.
there is some warranty
Yeah.
language in
Yes.
there, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and regarding the construction inspection services, do they pay you?
No, the township pays us, and then you deduct that amount from what you pay them.
So there's no markup.
So we'll be issuing a change order, deduct change order for the 25-2?
No, when they do the sheets together, Brian, there's a line item about two-way trim for this part of it. When Dave gives me a.
So it's a
pay sheet-
split, like a split billing
Pay
type
people
thing?
this, pay people that.
Yeah,
And if, okay, so if the numbers, go ahead, Dave.
I would say it's kind of like, when you issue a payment and you hold the retainage, you hold that the inspection money back as well.
So it's inspection retainage, essentially is what it is, okay. And, he's specified 30 days. So would it be fair to say that somebody from Wade Trim will be on that site for the duration?
As long as, when the contractors are working, we'll be there with them, making sure that they're doing it correctly, yes.
Okay, okay.
Absolutely.
Which is not different, say, like when we've done the road SADs, the county does that construction, you know, management, but they're the same thing, they're there. Now, whether or not you go out there and that guy's pickup truck is parked at this end of the road, or he's over at that street, or whatever, what I've found is you know, more often, there's other times when they're calling you saying, hey, come out and take a look, because we've got a decision to make here, right? So.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to make sure is, you know, there's gonna be a lot of on-the-fly calls that are probably gonna have to be made, because every area is a little bit different if you've been on that path, right?
No question.
So I get that part of it, I just wanna make sure, while they're doing that work, they're not telling Wade Trim, be out here Wednesday, we're gonna start Monday. I wanna make sure Wade Trim's there.
No, if they're working,
That was the reason for the question, because if it goes over 30 days, they're paying.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, it's
That's
not in
my
their best
concern.
interest to call you, right, no,
but when there's work going on, somebody from Wade Trim will be there. Now, they may take a break, go to lunch and all that other stuff, I get all that, right?
Right,
Okay.
and the same thing goes really when we say the fact that James P. as a contractor has done satisfactory work and has been reasonable to work with, we're willing to talk about $750,000 as a contract because of their past performance. Similarly, you know, Wade Trim has to ask themselves, do we really want to say, well, you know, that guy, you know, he wasn't there this week, but you're destroying a relationship that Wade Trim has that's well in excess of $25,000 annually
Right.
with Harrison Township. So I mean, this goes back to that. At some point, you have a trust in the contractors that you're dealing with, the service providers, and you mentioned something earlier. You know, there's an unlimited, like an almost unimaginable series of things that can come up, right? So to that point, there are some things that are, I guess for lack of a better word, pretty obvious or easy. Hey, they came across this, what do you want us to do? We really think we should do this. And it's not difficult for me to give that answer to, you know, to the contractor and the folks doing construction management. Somewhere in there, there's something that comes up that I say, you know what, I'm not comfortable deciding this. We got a board meeting in 2 days. I'm gonna ask the Board of Trustees what they wanna do. So I'm in that same boat. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes I reach to Larry and Adam and say, hey, what do you guys think? And sometimes maybe one of those questions comes up, so there's a discretion on my part, right? On how radical do they say, you know what, we ran into this issue, we want to completely reconstruct the path and meander around this tree. Like, well, I don't know that I'm ready to agree to that, maybe we better talk about it, you know? So,
What, just opinion-wise, you've seen the path?
Yeah.
What, years-wise, what do we buy ourselves? Just, I know you can't,
Right.
you can crack,
12.137.
and the only reason I'm asking, this is for the board's benefit, is this is a lot of money. And if we bought ourselves 5 years, we better start planning.
No, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is it
I
5
think
years?
I think you're buying well in excess of 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say the primary path, now, don't get me wrong, there's sections of the spillway that have needed attention for a long time. Here's another thing to consider to answer that question. You know, our own water and sewer field personnel have done numerous repairs, whether it's crossings, whether it's patches. So, you know, when you say buying time, you know, you might say, well, we bought this much time, but maybe 8 years from now, there's one little section that needs repair, but we don't really necessarily have to go out to contract. We can handle that internally, right? So,
Just a thought for all of us to,
Yeah.
you know, some board's gonna end up dealing with it.
I mean, the bulk of that, when the path got expanded from its original width to.
it was like 6 to 10 or.
Yeah, it went from 6 to 10 or 8 to 10 or something like that, to
Yeah.
meet federal standards. I mean, that was 25, 30 years ago, I'm guessing, you know what I mean? So like.
And there's sections of that path that don't need any attention 25 years later.
Right.
Or even if we say 20 years, right? I mean, it was before you and Tony came on board.
It was done before I left high school, you know what I mean? Like it's,
Not before I left.
well, you know.
Can I just ask one question real quick? From a timing standpoint, I think it's fantastic to be done before November 1st. It's going to be shut down at the beginning of October for 30 days. October is a great time of year to run and to walk. Is it that entire path going to be shut down at that particular time? Or are they doing sections at a time?
They'll do sections at a time.
Okay.
They'll have a separate contractor that's doing, subcontractor that's doing the crack sealing,
Okay.
separate from the other repairs, and so they may do those concurrently, or they may do them sequentially, depending on the availability of the contractors and whatnot, so.
The organizers, I announced that the hot cider hustle is November 5th.
Right.
So I've been getting those requests, like, hey, anything happening to the path this fall? And I said, well, maybe. So I was able to answer the folks at Lake St. Clair Metro Park today that we are confident that the entire path system is going to be redone by November 1st. But I spoke with Mr. Newmer, and we're assured that if this work does go forward, we'll have that conversation with James P. The Hot Cider Half Marathon is going to leave Lake St. Clair Metro Park, travel on the bike path, not quite to Crocker, but probably between Lance Cruz and Crocker is where what they'll do is when they have one of those paths things, and they're trying to go to exactly, 13.1 miles, where they put that loop to turn around gives them that adjustability to make it an exact course. So somewhere along that stretch, they're turning around.
Yeah, that was my main question, because you got the Free Press Marathon coming up. There's a lot of people that are using that path to run the train, so
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just wanted to see exactly, what the time frame for certain sections was, that's all.
Absolutely, yep.
And also one question, there's just one comment, Mrs. Rose and I noticed it, under recommendations, it says contract for the Union Lake sidewalk.
Oh,
Ah,
That's
yes.
a typo, I don't know how important that is, but just.
No, they're throwing that in for free.
actually, you know what, you caught me. Mr. Burkess and I had the conversation about 4:30, and I put this letter together really quickly, so, yep, you caught me, sorry.
No, it's all right.
Yep, no, that's the old copy and paste. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Yeah, C. William Barrell, 26-year resident. The reason why those pads under those benches are moving is because whoever put them in, and I can guarantee this, if and when you do maintenance on whichever ones are jacked up and crooked, I can guarantee that they did not dig down 10 inches and put in 6 inches of 21 AA crushed concrete, pack it down, and then lay your 4-inch slab for the park bench. So who inspects this preparation for these charitable park benches that are put up? I noticed they're all jacked up and crooked and everything else, and I can tell you right now, I know they didn't put 21 AA under there. They might have put pea gravel, they might have put sand, or nothing. You never ever want to pour concrete on sand, limestone, or pea gravel. You always want to pour concrete, no matter how big or small, 6 inches of compacted 21 AA. And you got to have it inspected before they pour the concrete. I see these park benches like that. I see them all over the place. It's terrible. They will start moving within one season. They'll start moving. The 21 AA, again, for your education, no charge for this, it holds water will get under that pad. Water will indeed get under that pad. What the 21 AA does, it holds the structure of the pad relative to the ground so the water can slowly dissipate so you don't wash away that base earth. Slowly. It's a slow process. It's a system. You have your concrete pad, your 6 inches of compact AA, that's all compact, all fit together as a structure. And then your water, if any water, which will get under that pad, it'll slowly dissipate. So that's how you want to do it. I mean, I've only been into this stuff 50 years, so what do I know? So that's what you got to do, okay? No charge for the education. Do that on all your park benches. Bust out that concrete and clean that mess up, because those benches look like HE double hockey sticks. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment. Any board comment, board members? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to award the bike path repaving work to James P. Contracting at a cost of $752,750 plus a 10% contingency. Award the construction management work to Wade Trim at a cost not to exceed $14,000 with the funding to come from ARPA funds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda, item F1, regarding a dock on Conger Bay. Board members, the residents at 41220 Conger Bay have requested approval of a new dock and boat hoist. The applicants have received the appropriate permits from the Department of the Army, Detroit District Corps of Engineers, as well as from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Water Resources Division. In our board packet is a recommendation letter from Wade Trim, and unless there's any questions or discussions, I recommend that we make a motion to approve the new 30-foot by 4-foot dock and 14-foot by 12-foot boat hoist at 41220 Conger Bay.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda, item G1, regarding our audit services. I don't know, Mr. Witt, if you want to handle that,
Yeah,
if we turn it
I'll
over to.
start off, and if I miss anything, Ms. Gibbs will fill the board in. As approved by the board, we recently went out for competitive bids for audit services. The finance director put together a very comprehensive packet based on some recommendations from other communities. We contacted a lot of firms, pretty much every firm that we knew of that was in the field, in the area that would be a potential bidder, and gave them a copy of the proposal. We received 5 bids, and they were reviewed first on a technical basis and then on a cost basis. So we did have them provide separate packets of information so we could look through and say, hey, this is what we want, and if price isn't an option, here's our number 1. And then we opened up the cost section and said, hey, what are the costs are, what's within our realms. Because this is one of those services where cheapest isn't always the best. You're buying something that's very important to the township. In both cases, though, the selection is Raymond. The proposed agreement is for a 3-year term with an additional 2 years, with an initial cost of approximately $45,000. This may change based on if we're required to do an additional audit work as a result of the recent infusion of ARPA money. I think they've been going back and forth and whether or not they're going to require a single audit for communities on that, depending on how it lines up. So we're sort of waiting for clear guidance on that, but again, their cost for that work was, again, the lowest. We've attached the proposals for your review. Another thing to mention is since we're proposing a change in our auditor, we sort of said like, hey, if we do this with you, can you give us a cost on the chart of accounts work that this board recently approved with UHY? And they gave us a much lower cost estimate of $2,625 compared to $9,000. So we would also like the board to authorize that we move that work to them. And we've spoken with UHY, they really haven't begun any work, maybe an hour or two, minimal cost, and it'll still bring our savings in for that project, so if the board authorizes that, we can move both sections over to it. Again, this isn't, we've received exceptional work from UHY.
And prior, Stuart Bouvet.
Yeah, and prior when they were Stuart Bouvet. So it's not an anti-one or another, they were, you know, one of our top selections when we were going through it at the time. It's just, once we got to cost, we felt we were still looking for somebody new at this point, and Raymond was the selection. So if there's something else that I can answer, or Ms. Gillis can answer, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, we're recommending that the board contract with Raymond for 3 years at an estimated first-year cost of $45,000, and to also move the chart of accounts projects to Raymond at a cost estimated of $2,625.
I'd just like to mention that we need to spell their name correctly. It has 2 N's in it.
We can't afford 2 ends. Cheap out, just put one.
I'm just saying it.
We're saving on ends. We're running short. It's almost the end of the month.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
And the only thing I would say is that it is understood that 2625 for the chart of accounts work probably will come with some small invoice that we may get from UHY.
We probably have 2 hours, 3 hours worth of work
Yeah,
with
I
them.
talked to the partner at UHY today, he said he's got a few, 3, 4 hours.
Right,
that he
but
said-
clearly not the balance of the 9,000.
Mm-mm,
Right.
not even close.
And again, and I'll echo, that this has nothing to do with the work that any of the associates from UHY did. I think it's responsible as a municipality to go out for bid from time to time for some services. Somewhere between the guy who, you know, drops off mulch and the guy who provides, you know, your legal services. I mean, there's a graduated scale of skill versus, you know, qualifications versus cost. This is kind of somewhere in between there, but we have confidence that this is the right choice, both from a cost and a ability standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll just
And
say.
it comes with 2 other years, optional. That would require action by this board. to
It would,
extend,
yes,
right?
we would bring it to the board prior to that.
Does the execution of this contract lock them in for those 2? In other words, do we get there and they say, we changed our mind, we won't do that work at that time?
It is a township option is the way we structured it,
Okay.
but I'm sure if it was if there was a distaste in the arrangement,
Oh.
there's options for them to get out and there's options
Yeah,
for us to
yeah,
get
but
out.
it isn't, in other words, it isn't as if the board chooses to move forward, we don't have to take action to lock in those 2 years.
No,
The contract spells out that language.
that's in the bid proposal, and that would be clear.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna add a little bit to it. We've been really happy with UHY, and this whole RFP process, I think, really stemmed from, hey, we really need to do the residents a service and really look at what else is out there, just because UHY has been our auditor for so long. And, I mean, there is value to that because they have a lot of knowledge base with the township. However, we just thought, let's go out for RFP and see what's out there. Raymond is a pretty heavy hitter when it comes to governmental services. They're up there with Plant Moran. Plant Moran decided not to bid for whatever reason. So when I was going through all the technical qualifications, some of the things I was looking at is what does the staffing structure look like that they're gonna give us? What kind of bang are we gonna get for our buck? We're looking at, do they demonstrate an understanding of our needs? You know, I made sure when I talked to them, hey, we're all about relationship building, that's important to us. So they clearly understood that. We also looked at their expertise. How many governmental clients do they have? How involved are they in the industry group? Are they preparing materials for GFOA events, which is a finance officers event? Are they speaking at these events? Are they really involved with the state of Michigan, which they are? They go hand in hand with them. And then we're looking at like the quality of the personnel that would be working on the engagement. So those are some of the things that I really looked at, and like Adam had said, I kind of reviewed all of the firms that submitted a bid based on, I was really zoning in on that stuff. And Raymond is, again, they're a big player in the governmental space, so they have a lot of resources that we could use. And then we opened up the bids, and Raymond happened to be the bid, so it worked out perfect.
And I will say the township benefited greatly from Mrs. Gibbons' expertise. She has a background in the audit field, so this went much smoother than it would have if I were running by myself. So we greatly appreciate that knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, no problem. And just one other thing I do want to mention, since you added that agenda number E2 for the weight trim project, if it's going to be substantially complete by November, we may trigger a single audit at that point. I know I was speaking with the principal earlier from Raymond, and all of them had asked, you're going to do a single audit, you're going to do a single audit. Up until 10 minutes ago, I was telling them, no, most likely not, we didn't really spend a lot of ARPA money. So I'll reach out and let them know, but just so the board's aware, the last I checked, it's my understanding, we can use ARPA funds to pay for that single audit.
But the single audit, meaning if you
spend over
$750,000
$750,000 in federal funds, you're required to do it. And
Right.
so,
we're already, at this point, we're
Between-
talking 850.
and between that and our Union Lake project, which is block grant money, and a
Correct.
couple other types of projects, we have a
Mhm.
couple other CDBG projects outstanding, and random, like, CARES funding that maybe got spent this year. So we're probably triggering it, but there was also talk that if people were taking the waiver, they were gonna eliminate
Yeah, it's a
it.
scaled down version of like,
Yeah.
it's not a full-blown single audit, if most of it's coming from ARPA usage. So it's a scaled down, I'm not gonna call it a review, but it's very scaled down. So I know a lot of people were happy to hear that Treasury.
But again, we have a price from them for that
Correct.
single audit, and it's really a mechanical thing. If it's needed, it's needed.
Correct.
We have to go through that process. It's not a
Correct.
decision that this board has to make.
Right, I just wanted to point out though, we can use ARPA funds for that.
Yep,
So it's
but the
not really
approval of
counted.
this, so the action by the board
Mhm.
is, I mean, I guess I wanna make sure. My instinct is that the board will move ahead with this. And we've got a first-year cost, we've got the chart of accounts projects. Does approval of this, or are we going to be talking about a future board action to approve the single audit?
We would probably look at approving the single audit later based on, as we get through the end of the year.
Because at this point, we're not certain.
Yeah.
So the
Sure.
board is not, it is likely to occur, but it would be future, so the board is not approving the single audit, even though we recognize that approval of this contract comes with it.
Yeah,
a
they're the ones that are
pre-established
gonna do it, you know, it's.
amount.
Yeah.
Correct, and if it happens,
And that project will be the driver.
Was it-
Where
was it
that
$8
comes
grand?
from at.
Yeah.
so if we're gonna spend the $8 grand, we'll be voting on it
Right, it'll be
in the
separate.
future. That's
Yeah.
all I want,
It's
it's
really-
not a part of this action.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I welcome a new auditor. I think a new, fresh pair of eyes is always good. And, the whole thing is, auditors, keep you in check, but they also give you guidance. So that's always a good thing, and especially from the treasurer's perspective, I welcome it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we had talked about too with all the firms that were bidding, like, hey, I wanna be able to talk to you throughout the year at no charge. I don't want the residents or us nickeled and dimed, everybody understands that. So unless it's like substantive work that they have to do, like, hey, we need to research it, we need to dig in, then of course I expect an invoice, nobody works for free. But built into this quote is, I can pick up a phone call away, hey, we got this new guidance coming out, what do you think about it, this is what I'm thinking, and we can have a conversation. UHY was really good at that when I first came on board. Their knowledge, they brought me up to speed with the township, finances and books and records and everything like that. And they didn't nickel and dime us either, so it's nice to have that built in.
And so two thoughts to that. One is during our relationship with Stewart, Bouvet and Whipple, and then later UHY, I remember going to an MTA conference and they said, you shouldn't be too comfortable with your auditor. And I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting concept. And so I mentioned that to Paul, and what Paul said was, and as I think back in our relationship, you might think, well, that means we have to change firms. And what he had said was, he said, we make it a point to try to rotate in and out lead personnel, and we did, during that time. And specific to that help, I mean, there were times when, Paul served on, when we talked about fire services and the various options and how to finance them back in, I think that was 2014, maybe as far back. Paul served on that committee, and that was no cost, so we, again, can't, saying good things about the work they did. Sometimes you go out for a bid, get a better price, and you feel you're getting good work, and it's the right thing to do, so.
And on that note though, I just will say that, some of the notes I made when I was reviewing Raymond and all the other ones, Raymond, they do have a backup principal on the job, or partner on the job, and it's specifically for audit rotation. So that gives you your fresh set of eyes, because as a township, you don't wanna go out every year to bid for an auditor. You just don't wanna do that, so. it's nice to have that built in.
All right. Any other discussion, or is there a motion?
Well, I guess I got a question. From UHY last year, how many hours, if any, do you recall they charged you T&M to their hourly rates?
I think it's on the hard copy of their invoice, and I can pull that for you and get it for you tomorrow first thing.
Okay, and the only reason I mention that is if you all, like I have, went through and looked at the hourly rate. How do you say the name?
Raymond.
They're almost double.
Mhm.
Their principal rate's $540 an hour. So it won't take long at a double rate to catch up to somebody else. So I guess I would just, I'd be curious to know what we spent hours wise. You know, if it's 50 hours a year, probably nothing. If it's a couple hundred hours a year, it's substantial.
Yeah, I can tell you, last year we had $4,800 was the amount that we negotiated with UHY on a time and additional cost based on some items that they were reviewing, but that was probably a higher amount that we had negotiated down at that
So
point.
probably 12 hours. Okay.
And that came before the board?
Yes, it did.
Raymond is budgeting, this estimate is based on 425 hours in total. UHY's budgeted hours was 480. I mean, so it's
Yeah.
pretty close.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Any other discussion, or is there a motion?
Just for my general knowledge, so it's fiscal year 2022, when did they do the audit?
I am, after the board approves, I'm gonna get with the principal, we're gonna start talking logistics. But generally speaking, I have them out mid-April to start doing field work. Probably take anywhere from, well, they're gonna be new this year, so let's say 6 to 8 weeks to go through. They'll be out here for a couple weeks, and then it goes through the approval chain at Raymond. They have a bunch set of eyes on their work. So 6 to 8 weeks, but everything in the RFP was outlined as far as, we want everything done. I wanna get the audit in front of the board the first meeting in June of next year.
Okay.
Yeah. So to do it any earlier is a little difficult because we're busy in the beginning of the year getting 1099s, W-2s out the door. There's a couple special pays we have to get out the door.
There's stuff lingering in still,
Yeah.
invoice things.
And you need to see things coming through so we can accrue properly, and things of that nature, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, welcome.
All right. Any other discussion, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to contract with Raymond for audit services for 3 years with an estimated first-year cost of $45,000, and to move the chart of accounts projects to Raymond at an estimated cost of $2,750.
Now, how'd you come with it? That's $2,750.
Wasn't that what it was?
2625.
2625, sorry.
Okay.
I'm pulling the wrong number out of the top of
No
my head.
problem, no problem. All right, motion by Mr. Witt, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mrs. Rose. We had a fair amount of discussion, is there further discussion?
Just reiterating the question, is we have an escape clause, correct? After the first year.
It's our option.
Well,
Yeah, we discussed,
I just wanna make sure it's in the contract, that we can, if we don't, heaven forbid this was the wrong decision,
we don't like them.
we can get out after the first year. That's what I heard earlier, I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, I don't
There's
remember-
escape language in the contract.
we'll make sure that there's language in there with some,
Yeah, so this
Opt-out
is just the
provision.
estimate. We'll have to sign an actual.
and it would be subject to Rob reviewing it and all that kind of
Okay.
stuff,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point. Any other discussion?
Just a quick question, board. So the chart of account project, you just said 2625. Do we want to pad that a little bit?
I said an amount estimated at 26.
Estimated, okay, perfect, thank you.
And that's because of the billable hours from UHY, you're saying?
Well, no, I mean,
Well,
Or
yeah.
did they?
they might need plus or minus an hour, kind of, a couple hours kind of thing, so they said, we think based on our other clients, this is the number, but if they come in and go like, oh, it's a hornet's nest, and it's gonna take us, 4 more hours, it's just, 4 more hours, but,
Well, yeah, but 4 more hours that,
it wouldn't, it's not necessarily a principle, it's,
I guess I'm just
But
curious,
it was
like,
the- it was the
like,
same-
are we comfortable as a board saying an estimated cost? Well, it really came in at 30,000. I know that's not what you're gonna do,
No,
but
no, no.
you want, would the board wanna talk about a not to exceed, so that God forbid, hey, we were at 9 grand, well, pretty soon we're at 12, gosh, I guess we shouldn't have done
I'm
that.
happy to say, I'm sure to say it's not gonna exceed $9,000.
Right, yeah.
You know, I mean, if the.
I guess
board's
if
more
there,
comfortable-
if there was a number, I'm not sure what that comfort level is on behalf of the board to say, are we authorizing? I feel more comfortable with a number specific. God forbid, I don't really wanna have to come back and talk about this, but if there was a substantial change in that scope of work, where's the line we'd say, well, you should talk about it? So if it's, I don't care if it's not to exceed 5 grand, I just need to know a number, I feel like we're better off with a
That's
number.
fair.
So, and you made the motion, so I'm gonna defer to you to maybe potentially modify
Yeah,
that
an
motion.
amount not to exceed 5,000 is fine.
And that way you'd have some leeway to cover any billable hours from UHY and any variation. So if I'm going from 9 grand total to 5 grand total, pretty happy with that. If it comes in less, that's great. If it comes in more, we need to talk about it.
Yeah, and the price differential from UHY to Raymond is almost 12 grand too. So-
Yeah, yeah. So that cost for the chart of accounts, I know they gave us a 2625, we're saying not to exceed 5. Continued support, Mrs. Rose?
Yes,
Okay.
sounds fair.
Good, okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda is item H1, which is all the way down at page 249, if you're playing along at home, keeping score. So scroll on down to page 249 in our board packet, because we had all that support information from the various auditing firms. Mr. Witt.
Yes. So this item, seeking board approval to migrate our website to a .gov domain. So using a .gov top-level domain for online services like our website or email helps the public quickly identify us as a trusted government resource because only US-based government organizations can register a .gov domain, and it is available at no cost currently. This is different than other well-known top-level domains like .com, .org, .us, where anyone in the world can register those with a fee. So malicious actors know this, and they've sought to impersonate especially election organizations. And it has been highly recommended that all local governments begin this transition. At this point, we're looking for board authorization for the supervisor to submit the authorization letter, a draft of which is attached. A lot of that was just foreign language from the feds. They say plug in your names and that kind of stuff. And to apply for harrisontownshipmi.gov and to work with our IT provider to begin that migration. At this point, we're not sure of any cost from the back end. There's a couple of technical requirements, but we're digging into those. But we just want to start the process by sending this letter in. Anything that would exceed normal spending limits would be brought to this board. Our thought is that as we eat through any existing stationery or letterhead and that kind of stuff, we can mirror our sites so it would post from one to another and have our emails forward for a while. So there's some transition time. That's where some of those costs might be, is having two living at the same time.
Yeah, we might, both might work for some time, but the goal is to ultimately get to a .gov platform.
Yeah, when I've looked at other communities where they've done it, they'll have a splash screen that says this is now this, and they'll have either emails will automatically bounce back and say this email address won't work past here, it's now this.
I'll make that motion.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, I'll go with Mr. Barato, due to your kindness. All right, so to authorize the supervisor to submit the authorization letter to apply for harrisontownshipmi.gov and to work with our IT provider to begin the migration. Any discussion on the motion?
And I just want to add, like, I picked that website address because that fits the guidelines for what they have. You have to have township in it, you have to have MI in it to denote, we're not big enough to say we're Detroit.gov or something like that, so.
I think we are,
We're not, but we're important enough, not big enough.
This actually will be a lot more simple without the dash.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that call in and they try to send us emails, and it's tough. It's tough with our current.
Yeah.
So this is
good, but it also follows a particular format. This isn't something you created as much as saying, there is no other Harrison Township in Michigan.
Right.
So Harrison Township MI can't be misconstrued.
But there can be another Harrison Township, there's a Harrison Township in
New
Ohio,
Jersey.
New Jersey, Mattis, I think in Wisconsin.
Yep.
Anyway.
So, all right, any discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. Barato. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda, item I-1. Board members, we recently lost a long-term bus driver to another community due to a better pay opportunity for that driver. I asked our senior activity coordinator to review the wages for the drivers in other communities to see how our wages compare to others. In the board packet, I listed a brief listing of wages in other communities. Most of the municipalities that we reached out to, these are neighboring municipalities: Roseville, East Point, Mount Clemens, Clinton Township, St. Clair Shores, Romeo Bruce, Shelby Township, and Sterling Heights. Most of them had a tiered wage schedule, acknowledging maybe either a start and then a, stepped up, maybe with or without CDL, or part-time or full-time. So the bus drivers we have are working, pretty darn near full-time by definition. Currently the bus drivers make $14.47 per hour. Comparing to our peers, I believe that we could structure this to make it $15 per hour or $16 per hour if they possess a CDL. And that would be effective tomorrow if the board is willing to do that. We do have a policy where we still index these hourly rates based on the inflation, same for our other part-time employees. But at this time, I'd be recommending that we increase the hourly rate for our smart shuttle bus drivers to $15 per hour or $16 per hour with a CDL effective September 27th, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there support?
I'll support that motion.
All right, we've got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Olgiati. Any discussion on the motion?
We don't employ a driver without a CDL, do we?
Currently, we do not. Right, so both of our drivers are at, so this is $1.53 per hour raise. That this isn't a huge pool of candidates. I mean, this isn't, even at $16 per hour, there's still, there's a lot of other employment opportunities in this range. We have, certainly sorry to lose the driver we had, but we have other drivers that we value. The school pays a greater rate than this, but it's a different structure and it's a different kind of a job description, but I do believe this is reasonable and fair. If our drivers were to go to St. Clair Shores or Romeo Bruce, this is what they're being paid. Mount Clemens, this is what they're being paid. Some of the communities, they're still paying greater than this. So I think it's not the highest, it's not the lowest, but I think it's more in line with what our peers are paying.
I think that's probably more valuable services that we provide our residents in Harrison Township. I think people really use that, and every time you come in contact with one of the bus drivers, they're very, very pleasant.
Yeah,
they're very helpful, they're very, very good at what they do, and they're definitely an asset to the community.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, depending on where you're at in life, what phase of life you are in, you see this bus go by, you think nothing of it. But if you're one of the people that utilize this, it's an extremely meaningful service. And I will tell you, we are blessed with drivers who not only provide the service, but they are, ambassadors isn't a good enough word. I mean, they care for the residents that they serve, and it's I know we don't think about bus drivers as a vocation, but the drivers we have, it is a vocation. They do truly care for the riders that they have, and to the point where someone doesn't call for a ride and they'll be driving by, they'll stop by and knock at the door and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Is everything okay?" I mean, it's really.
Yeah, I can attest to that. My father.
Yeah, right. I mean, they truly have a relationship with the residents that we serve, that they serve as well, and so we're fortunate to have that. So, any other discussion? Is there public comment?
Oh, yes, board members. I was wondering, with the COVID money, did the party bus, I would just call it the party bus, I don't know, but the smart bus, did they get their bonus for hazard pay like everybody else? So could you school me on that? I know there was a big list, and I failed to go down the list and study the list. Did the party bus drivers or smart bus drivers, senior bus drivers, did they all get the Uncle Joe or Uncle Don COVID money? Did they get the hazard money? So that's my question. And if not, I think somebody should make a motion up here on the board that they do get the COVID hazard pay money for driving the party bus or the smart bus, senior bus, whatever you want to call it. Great bus. So, again, if they did not get the money, someone step up to the batting cage, batting plate, and let's get them their hazard pay money that everybody else got. So, again, I looked at the list and so could you tell me if the bus drivers did get the money, and if they didn't, that would be the right thing to do? Somebody make a motion so that they all get their hazard pay, because, you know, they did have to, you know, work through all this, and I know people had time off, la-di-da, this and that and the other. But I would like the party bus people to get the drivers to get their money. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Short answer to the resident's question is yes. There were a few different streams of funding at a federal level that gave us the ability to provide various types of hazard pay. 2020, the state of Michigan made available a $1,000 grant, if you will, or I should just say grant, of up to $1,000 for first responders. So in the most recent hazard pay, we did not provide any pay to the firefighters for 2020 because they had already been compensated for 2020. The pay for firefighters reflected 21 and 22. Our general fund employees across the board, in a very generic statement, received monies for 2020, 2021, and 22. If a firefighter had been with us for all 3 years and received both grants, they would have received $3,000. If a general fund employee had been a part of the township for all 3 years, the most we paid general fund employees were $1,500. It's short notice, and I apologize because I hope I'm not misquoting, but back on April 12th of 2021, the board approved a Smart Cares Fund allocation. The highest paid hazard pay was $2.50 per hour, and the period of time that was reflected in that resulted in excess of $3,000 of hazard pay paid to 2 of our drivers. I don't remember what the final numbers were, so I apologize for that, but just looking it up, my quick allocation shows me that those bus drivers received more in hazard pay than our firefighters did. I don't remember what the net was, but the short answer is yes. The majority of the primary lead bus drivers received more than any general fund employee. But it was a different pocket of money, and you know, it's kind of one of those things. Well, this fund we used to compensate these folks. These funds had to be used. There were CARES money that came through SMART, so they had to be used for the SMART bus drivers, or they had to be used for certain things, and so we took care of it that way. I see Miss Gibber's typing away. Maybe she's coming across with a number, but that's what I noticed. So short answer, yes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Olgiati. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Next on our agenda is item J, which is public comment. They can be about any subject you wish. We try to limit those comments to 5 minutes in length or less.
C. William Bardell, 26-year resident, clean cut, do-gooder, boy next door, clean up, fix up, people helping people. So what I wanted to ask, my question was, in the last pool of money that was just released, I would say, I'm going to say 2 months ago, did the party bus drivers get a little bit percentage-wise of that money? So if you do a applied eligible equation and you broke that down percentage-wise, did they indeed get some of that COVID money for the party bus drivers? That's my question. Like all the general employees got. So if you break that down mathematically as an equation, 40 hours, and then you break that down, my question is, did the party bus drivers indeed get the last lump of the COVID hazard pay? That's my question. The other thing I'd like everyone to please check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook, follow, stay up to date on everything that's going on. And with that, board members, residents, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. I apologize, I thought I made that clear. So we did, at our last meeting, so literally 2 weeks ago, we voted to use some of the ARPA funds, a small fraction of the ARPA funds, to offer hazard pay to our firefighters and general fund employees. 2 weeks ago, we had a schedule for firefighters, for general fund, and part-time employees. We did not include bus drivers in that distribution of funds. We altered the amount that we gave firefighters because they had received some in the past, and we didn't include the bus drivers because there was another source of money a year or two ago that was used and dedicated specifically for hazard pay for bus drivers. So considering that our full-time bus drivers received more than anybody else in the township, we didn't see that they were left out of the hazard pay equation. So I guess if you're asking, did we allocate money 2 weeks ago? No. Did we allocate money in the past? Yes. Was that money in excess of what everyone else received? Yes. So hopefully that's an answer for your question. Any other board comments? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cavanello with support by Mr. Brado. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.